Welcome to Learn the Sword. Thinking about it, not only does wood make a sound, of course metal and steel also have their own tones. And there are tons of different tones because there are many different types of swords. Each sword's size, weight, and design creates a different tone. A matter of fact, if you were musical, you could probably set up a lot of swords, put some tones on it, and start making a little bit of music. That makes it interesting, doesn't it? But let's talk about how this tone works for you. Let me pull out a regular iaito. This is basically an old beater sword. It has a bohí to it. And this bohí, you also known as the blood groove. The blood groove is a nice word for it, but basically what a bohí is here to do is it makes the sword tone a little differently at this point in your training. So whatever you read in the history books or this, that, and that is great, but what I want you to look at is how it can apply to you today. A lot of times when you take out the sword, and you could have an identical sword to this, and this one has a different tone than the other one, just the way it is. I've seen a few cases where students buy one particular sword, and they really like it because it sounds so good, and they buy the exact same model, and it doesn't tone at all. It's just that's the way it is. It's like making paper airplanes. You make it sloppily, it flies well. You make it perfectly, for some reason it just doesn't go as far. I guess that's Murphy's Law. Nevertheless, when we deal with a sword and its tone, I swing down, swing down. Now, could you hear that tone? I couldn't hear it as much. Usually the person that is striking out can't hear the tone half as well as the person across the room. So remember that. A lot of times when the sword is making a tone and you can't hear it, it's because the tone is not coming towards you, it is going away from you. So listen to it again. Now let me put a little bit of shibodu or ringing into the blade. Now you can hear the difference. But then again, do you go slow or do you go fast? The faster you go, the more you have to shibodi, the more pressure is put on your wrist through your shoulder. So remember that. So if you do it really hard and fast, maybe 6 or 7 times to get good tone, and it starts becoming a little fatigued, pull back. But the more you ring the sword and the faster you come down with the tone over time, it will develop some good muscles here. Another thing that you want to look at is when you swing the sword down and when you bring it back up, does it tone too? That makes it really difficult, just because a lot of times, again, you can't hear it. That's just the way it is. Then you go, well, what's the best thing to do? Find a sword that has different tone. So I have a few models here, a few tools here. I want us to hear the various tones. This sword here, this iaito, you can see it's really, really beat up. I got this one back in probably 1985 in Sakura Shimachi. Anyway, this has well over 1 million casts on it. A nice 980 gram sword. And the reason why I got this is because the first sword I got, which has a lot more than 1 million strikes on it, was 1180 grams, and it was after a while it got a little heavy, just because I got a little bit older. So what happens is hear the tone on this. Sounds pretty good. So that's where you should have the tone, but what happens if you go a little slower? Hear the tone? So even if you go slow and it still tones, that means that you are spot on. And the angle of attack does pretty well and there's no wavering in your hands. A lot of times people are going to come up and they're going to swing this way and they're going to swing this way. And it's going to be louder. It's just the way life is until you can adjust it. Sometimes they'll make a really loud noise like this, and over on this side won't even make a noise because they have to shibodu, or they have to ring the blade from the right side or the left side or straight down. That's why cutting straight down is a lot easier, because you're right down the middle, whereas angles become a little bit more difficult. Now, let's look at a little bit heavier sword. This one here is the very first sword I ever got. It is a 1180 gram sword. It's very, very heavy. Of course, it's an Iaito, so it doesn't have a sharp blade, but I can guarantee the heaviness of this will chop through a tatami mat fairly easy. Now, looking at this, hear the tone on this one. Same thing. I can't go as fast. I'll try to go a little faster from here. That sounds pretty nice. Now, if I bring the sword way back in a classical manner, and I can throw it out this way. And the more oomph you have here to throw out works pretty well, but remember, after you get used to getting a straight lines and angles, and you're coming way back like this and throwing out, over time, I want you to alleviate from this and bring it up to here. Because now you're trying to go on the target instead of winding up to go over. Nevertheless, let's look at a different tone. And look at the difference between a heavier blade and a lighter blade. Can you hear the difference? And with that, I want you to take those things into consideration when you look, practice, and wonder about how does my sword make the tone, how does it make the whistle, and what are the different aspects to it.